A woman screamed so loud that it muted all other sounds from the outside world, and vines curled onto Gilmore's legs. The image of what was happening barely began forming inside his head, and already a dozen of Eroshari were standing next to him, spears and staffs at ready. He would have surely fallen if it wasn't for the vines holding him in position. He wobbled for a second until he regained balance, and also could now see the terrified expression on Keyleth's face. She hadn't been so lucky to have something for stability, therefore she was now sitting on the ground looking angry. A couple of seconds passed until they both realized what had happened. The guards were unmoving, ready to stab him if he moved an inch. His problem was that he had no real control over his body while he was tangled up between those vines. He had to say something.
I really love making an entrance, and I love having people greet me, but this is not quite what I had in mind.
He looked around with a smile, but again, none of the guards moved. Keyleth was the one who replied when seeing the teleportation stone on the ground.
Gods damn it! Gilmore? I freaking forgot I had this thing.
She rapidly signaled the guards to pull away from him, and in an instant, the vines disappeared into the ground they sprung from. Only now could he observe a little bit of Zephyra, the town of the Eroshari tribe. He'd never been to Summit Peaks before, so the view of the clouds in the distance rendered him speechless. Keyleth watched the horizon together with him as the first colors of twilight crawled upon the sheets of the sky.
Welcome to Zephyra.
Her voice broke the silence, and Gilmore knew he had to turn and face her. He first only caught a glimpse of her mantle, which was falling towards the ground, caressing it. Her red-orange hair shone in the light, and it seemed like it went back to being shoulder length, just like it was when Gilmore first saw her. He knew Keyleth had changed, but in that particular moment, nothing of her physical appearance seemed to indicate that, except, perhaps, the attire she now had to wear as a leader of her people. He continued watching the sky.
Hey, Gilmore. Is everybody alright?
She was almost embarrassed.
Can I ask what you're doing here?
He finally turned towards her.
Yes, everyone is all right. I just came to see you, Voice of the Tempest.
He bowed his head.
I beg your forgiveness. I was taken aback by the view from up here.
She moved away from the spot they shared and headed for the round, single-carved table next to them. She took a bottle of wine and poured some of it in 2 heavy chalices. Gilmore also came after her and took the one Keyleth pushed into his hands. She sat down on one of the wooden stools, and while playing with the contents of the chalice, she had to speak again.
I assume you came here because, well, you know.
She raised her drink.
To Vax.
He did the same, but again, no words escaped him. They both took a sip, and she continued.
Who told you?
Allura.
He sat down as well.
Ha! Then it means none of us actually had the courage to tell you. Some brave heroes we are.
Are you implying I am worse to confront face-to-face than Vecna? Just to be perfectly clear, I'm not judging any of you for that.
She didn't seem to believe him.
I am sorry for your loss, Keyleth.
For the first time since he set foot upon the mountaintop, he searched for her eyes. She looked at him empty.
Thank you, Gilmore.
She filled both chalices again and pressed on.
Thank you for all the things you've done for us over the years. Maybe if you weren't so busy, you would have been a great addition to our party.
Keyleth was sincere, but the situation seemed so impossibly unreal to her that it almost felt like it wasn't her voice, the one which was uttering the words. She never imagined sitting like this, sharing glasses of wine with the glorious Gilmore and Zephyr. What mind could have thought of this possibility in these circumstances? Between the dusk and twilight, there they were. A thought crossed her mind in a split second.
You know, you'd have loved to see us here, just talking. You grew fond of this spot over the months because you can easily see dusk settle over the horizon. He'd sit here until it got dark. I guess a part of him really got used to the darkness. He didn't hate it anymore. He embraced it every time.
She touched the wood with her extended palm. Gilmore secretly wondered if Fax missed seeing the sunset, so he turned his back to it, facing only Keyleth on the other side of the table. The coldness of the night started making its presence known, as if the day wasn't cold enough until then.
They've told me he did not fear.
No. He constantly asked us to be kind to each other and love each other as we sat there, looking at a man literally walking towards his end.
Thoughts of all the things they might have attempted to do to save him came to her.
He absolutely didn't want us to compromise his pact with the Raven Queen, but you probably already know that.
She looked down towards her lap.
What is there that I could possibly tell you about Vax that you don't already know?
She didn't see the surprised expression on his face.
Keyleth, that's not true.
No. Whatever you don't know, you can deduct. You've always had a way of understanding each other.
The druid looked at him peacefully, yet somehow shaken.
Again, Keyleth, I honestly do not believe that to be the truth.
He didn't even consider if that might be the truth or not, because right now it didn't matter.
I couldn't help him, Gilmore. Maybe you could have done something. God. What have we done?
She began trembling. He shifted his position and extended his hand.
Keyleth, you did more than anybody could have possibly done. Vecna, the Raven Queen, you fought and bargained with gods.
He saw the tears in her eyes and squeezed her hand harder. Her sadness was poking at his tired heart more horribly than anything else.
What have we done? We loved him, and we simply watched him die.
Gilmore got up and went round the table and, without hesitation, leaned down to hug her as she still sat there. Her orange hair smelled of the dust of Zephyr.
Keyleth, I am sorry you had to witness that. Just remember that he knew the bargain from the beginning.
The surreal portrait created by the sky's colors completely paled in comparison to the image of the half-elven druid Keyleth and the dark-skinned, exuberant Gilmore in an embrace, while their eyes pierced the heavens. The man's voice could be heard mingling with the wind.
He was lucky to have you, Keyleth.
She laughed between tears.
That's exactly what he said to all of us. Last. He was lucky.
She leaned her back against Gilmore's frame and wiped away some of her tears, just for her eyes to immediately start producing more.
He went toward the shadows, and there was his mother, waiting for him. At least now he can protect her as he always dreamt he could.
Gilmore's curtains blew in the wind. He saw a flash of those violet curtains from his house back in Iman. There, in the chamber near his shop, Vax stood in an armchair and told him about his mother. No champion attire, just a plain, stitched-up shirt that allowed Gilmore to get a glimpse of the clasp tattoo between the rogue's shoulders. Vox Machina didn't exist. Ravens were just birds, and the wind was but a nuisance. He remembered that was the first evening the rogue came to him without any intention of doing business. However, a transaction had indeed happened, but he, the merchant, was unsuspecting. Gilmore received him in his private chamber without the smallest clue that a piece of his heart would be on the table, up for bargaining. He allowed Vax to sit with him, have some of his wine, and talk about his mother. Soon he learned it was actually the grim anniversary of her death. Vax proceeded to tell him that his twin sister didn't remember the exact date when it happened, and that he never told her he did. Whatever Vax couldn't tell the world, he told Gilmore, because Gilmore embodied the world he had yet to discover. How and when did they evolve from talking over prices of most definitely stolen goods to sharing cups of tea and wine every other night? When did it start precisely? Did it happen when Vax smiled one morning after a full night of telling Gilmore his adventures? Did it happen when they once said goodbye and after what had become their routine hug, Vax kissed him and walked away? Did it happen the first time Vax addressed him as Shaun? Not even Shaun Gilmore knew when the dance started, but he knew that it was in a time with no dust, no wind, no winter, no dragons, no gods, no other people but him and Vax. He felt Keyleth's hot tears on his arms as he was still holding her silently. The sun had almost set and Zephyr was falling asleep. Nevertheless, something had awoken inside him at the sight of the soon approaching night.
I have to go, Keyleth,
he said in a rushed voice.
Forgive me, I kept you up far too long.
With that, he let go of her. She smiled towards him and gave him the teleportation stone.
Take it, and know that you can always come visit me. My father says that a person dies when we stop mentioning their name.
Gilmore's eyes were about to fill with tears, so he just took the stone.
We can put a stop to that. Of course, I'll come. Goodbye, Keyleth.
He stepped backward and shivered when the cold night wind went through the fabric of his clothes.
Bye, Gilmore.
Her voice sang the lament.